Hi everybody. In this video, I want to show you how to install osTicket on a Linux server. As you're probably aware, osTicket is an open support ticketing system, so this works quite well for IT help desk environments. Although in my case, I am using it as a systems librarian to track the work that I do. This is a relatively easy system to install on a Linux server, though those who aren't familiar with Linux may struggle a little bit with some of the concepts um, behind building this. So I decided I would make this video to kind of help those who are not as familiar with Linux along as they install osTicket. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the osTicket website at osticket.com, and we want to go to downloads. And I am self-hosting. I'm not paying for cloud support. So I'm going to go ahead and click download, and we'll get this download page here. To the right, there's the install guide. When I click on that, it gives us a link to the wiki. I'm just going to open that in a new tab, and we'll go there. And we're given things like prerequisites. Essentially, we're building a LAMP server. Um, and so we're going to need the Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Here it tells us what versions we need to have. So we need to have either 5.4 or above for PHP. MySQL 5 or better also needs to be installed. Some of the stuff that I'll be installing in this video are kind of older versions, but that's just because the environment I'm in requires that I do that. So I have these instructions in front of me, and I am going to SSH into one of my pre-existing servers. And so if you don't already have a Linux server up and running, there are plenty of videos on YouTube that will show you how to do that. In this video, I have a very base installation of a Debian server. So at this point, I don't even have Apache or MySQL or PHP installed. The idea is, or my thought behind this is, for those who are kind of starting fresh, I thought maybe I would walk through all of the steps. So we'll quickly install the software that's needed. So the first thing that we need is Apache 2, our web server. So we'll do sudo, which is running running this command as a super user, and so sudo apt get install Apache 2. Okay, so we have Apache 2 set up. Now what we'll do is install MySQL. So sudo apt get install mysql server. This isn't a production environment, and I'm doing this on a virtual server. So I'm not going to bother with any MySQL root user passwords. I'm just going to hit enter. And this will happen a few times. I'm going to hit enter each time. So now we have Mysql-Server installed. And we're now going to want to install PHP. So we'll do sudo apt-get install. In my case, I need to use PHP 5. You may be using PHP 7.0 at this point, so you can go ahead and use that. You may have to investigate which version of PHP is available in your repositories. In this case, I have to use PHP 5, so I'm doing PHP 5. Okay, and in addition to PHP 5, I need to install something that allows PHP to talk to MySQL. So I'm going to sudo apt get install PHP 5-MySQL. Okay, so we now have our web server built. We've installed onto our Linux system, we've installed Apache 2, which is our web server, uh, MySQL, which is our database, and PHP, which kind of acts as an intermediary between Apache 2 and MySQL. What we're going to do now is you'll see that on the website that you will need one MySQL database with valid user password and host name and all that fun stuff. So what we're going to do is set that up right now. I'll just make this a little bit bigger. We'll clear the screen. And so to do that, we're going to run mysql-u root-p. And we have no password for this. If you did install a password, or if you did create a password as you were installing MySQL, then that's the place to use it. And so what we're going to do first is create a user, and we'll do that by running this command, create user, and I'm going to call it osTicket underscore user, and then at localhost. So this is saying that on this server, this user will live, and we then want to run the command identified by password. So here you want to put in any password you want to put in. I'm just using password for this test environment. And you want to make sure you put in the semicolon. So we'll run that. Okay, and you want to remember this, that you have a user called osTicket underscore user, and that the password in this case is password. Okay, now we want to create the database where all of our data will live for osTicket, and we will do that by running this command, create database, and I am going to call it osTicket and semicolon. So we have that, and now we want to give privileges to the osTicket user for the osTicket database, and we'll do that by running this command, grant all privileges on osTicket dot asterisk to osTicket user and semicolon. Okay, now we can exit from MySQL and we should be good to go. So now we'll go back to the website. We have created our MySQL database and we've granted full privileges on that database to our osTicket user. We're not using Windows, so we don't need to worry about that. So at this point, you should have downloaded the latest version of osTicket, and you can get the latest version here. What I'm going to do is just open that in a new tab, and then from here we can click on download, and then I've done this a couple of times. We'll just fill in our information, so they're going to get my information a few times. Hopefully this will be the last. And then we'll click on download. And it brings us to this page and it downloads this zip file. But I want to do this all through the command line. I don't want to bother with FTP clients and all that stuff. So we're doing this strictly by command line, and so what I'm going to do is this link here that says click here, if I right click on that and copy link address and then bring up my shell, and I'll just clear things out so that we have a fresh page to work with. First thing I'm going to do is change directories to var www HTML. And depending on what server you're using, determines what directory you should go into. Anything that's somewhat newer is this will work, but in older versions of Debian-based Linux, you may have just the www directory. So if HTML does not exist on your server, then just do all of this in the www directory. So we're going to go to this directory, and then I'm going to do sudo wget, and then I'm going to paste our download URL, and looks like I've lost it. We'll just redo it. Copy link address, wget. Okay, download that. Make sure it's there, and it is, and we can run the command sudo unzip osTicket unzip. Oh, like I said, this is a newer server that I just built, so I don't have unzip on it. And what we'll do is sudo apt-get install unzip. Okay, now we can run our unzip command. Okay, so we've unzipped all of that here. Let's just list. There we go. All right, so now let's go back to our instructions. And they're telling us that we can upload all of the files and directories in the upload folder to a directory of your choice. And what I'd like to do is just keep it on the main page. So what I am going to do is move all of the contents from upload and just put them into the index.html. And I do that with this command, sudo mv -var -www -html upload. So we're going to take everything from that directory, put a little asterisk after it so we get everything, and we're going to move it into the var www -html directory. Okay, so now when we list the contents of the directory, you'll see that all of the contents of upload have now come here. And we can just now remove the upload directory. So I'm just going to sudo rm-r upload and get that out of there. Now we can go back to our instructions. And we see that osTicket installer needs to be able to write and modify the ost-config.php found in the include directory. So what we're going to do is, you'll see the include directory is right here, and we'll just move into that. So change directory, cd include, we'll list the contents, and what they're telling us is we need to have open read and write access to this file here, although we need to kind of resave it so that we take sample out of there. So I'm going to do that with the nano editor. It does require super user privileges, so sudo nano ost-sample config. Alright, so enter. And then we don't really have to change anything in here. I'm just going to hit space and backspace and then Control X so that I can save. Yes, we want to save changes, but in this case we want to take out the word sample from this config file, and we'll hit enter, and we do want to save it under a different name. So now when we list, you'll see that we have our OST-config PHP file here and the sample config file here. And we do that so that if this file gets ruined, we can always go back to the sample config file that has all of the defaults. In our case, we're not going to edit any of that, so we don't have to worry about it. What we do have to worry about, though, is that this file has read and write privileges on it. And I'm going to do that using the chmod command. So sudo chmod 777 ost-config. And so this 777 just means that the user group, and everybody essentially gets all privileges. This is not something we want to keep, and we'll come back to this later to change those settings so that we have better security. For now, we're going to hit enter, and I just want to make sure that all the privileges were set the way I want them. So I'm going to ls-l ost-config php. And so you'll see here that the user root has read, write, and execute privileges. The group root has read, write, and execute privileges. And most importantly, all users here at the end have read, write, and execute privileges. So now let's go back to the website, and we will follow the instructions here. So now what they would like us to do is go to our domain and then /support. So again, this is a virtual machine, so I'm using an IP address. And we have the Apache 2 default page. And actually, now's probably a good time to, we'll go back to the HTML directory. We'll list what's in there. So what we're seeing here is kind of the default Debian Apache 2 page. And technically, we're supposed to get our our web installer here for osTicket. In order for that to happen, we need to take out the index.html file that you'll see exists right there. So what we'll do is sudo rm index.html lists, and it is no longer there. And what we'll do is refresh. And so we get the osTicket installer at this point. The other way of doing that is we could have done, so in my case, I could have done the IP address, the 10.3.20. whatever, and then a -support, and that would have done the same thing. Okay, so we have a few things that the web installer is telling us is missing from our installation. And actually, I know that probably this one here, this extension actually does exist. So what we need to do is restart the Apache server. Anytime we make any changes to PHP, we have to restart the Apache server. So we can do that with sudo service apache 2 restart. Okay, so that should take care of some of these anyway. We'll refresh. So yes, it did take care of this extension, but there are a couple others that we still need. So the GD lib extension, and you may have to do some Google searches to kind of figure out what command to use exactly. Again, in my case, I'm using PHP 5. I think at this point most people aren't using that, and have probably moved on to 7. But like I said, in my case, it's a requirement for me to use PHP 5 on our servers. So what we're going to do is to get the GD extension, it is simply sudo apt get install PHP 5. If you're using PHP 7, it's probably PHP 7.0, and then a -GD. And yes. Okay, so we got that one. The PHP IMAP. So what we'll do is we will run sudo apt get install PHP 5 IMAP. Yes. Okay, now the next one is the intl extension, and we'll do that with sudo apt-get install php5 intl and enter. Okay, and our last one, apcu extension, and we can do that with sudo apt-get install php5 apcu. Okay, good. So now we'll have to restart our Apache 2 server, and I'm just going to keep hitting the up arrow until I get that command. I've already typed it. Why type it again? All right. So now when we refresh this page, we'll see that everything is kind of fixed. And again, these are also just recommendations. I find it's best just to kind of follow along with recommendations. So I've installed everything. Now we'll hit continue, and then we just fill in the information here. So I'm just going to call this test help desk. Default email, I think in this case I am going to use my libsys group, and I am in the admin user, so I'm going to put in my first name, my last name, email address, username, password, retype my password, and down here you'll see our database settings. So when we created our MySQL tables and users, we need to remember that information. So most likely your host name is localhost. The MySQL database that I created was called osTicket, so I will put that in. Make sure you use the database name that you used. The MySQL user, osTicket user, and then the password I put in there, which as you recall was password. And here we go. We are just about there. What they're telling us now is, you'll recall I did the chmod 777 so that we could do all the right access to the OST-config file. So now what we're going to do is delete that, or change those settings. So what we'll do is sudo chmod, and what they're telling us, oops, sorry about that. We have, so we're just going to run this command, although in my case I'm not a super user for this server, so I have to use the sudo chmod and then 0644, and that is in the include directory, and it's ost. Oh, do I have this right? Whoops, I see. I should not have put that in there. Okay, so it's sudo chmod 0644 include / ost-config php, and enter. So now if we look at that, so we'll just change into that directory, include, and if we ls-l ost-config php, you'll see that we've reverted permissions back so that only the root user can read and write to it. All others can just get read access to it. So we're good to go there, and There are two important links down at the bottom. One is for the ticketing system, so that's where your users would go to create tickets, and then your staff control panel, which we won't really get into. I suspect there are videos out there that kind of help you navigate through it. There's a lot there. It's a pretty robust system, quite impressive for an open source product. So I'm going to open this in a new tab, and I'm just going to use this username here and the password I put in, and there we have it. So we are now in the back end of the OS ticketing system, and you'll see here it says please take a minute to delete setup dash install directory. That's a good idea for security reasons. Whoops, that's not the shell I want. So what I will do is delete that file. Whoops, I'll make this a little bigger. And let's just clear that, and we will change directories back. Those two little dots will take us back to our to the previous directory, to the parent directory. And so they want us to get rid of setup install. I think setup is in here, so we'll just ls, and let's see, setup directory is there. So sudo rm dash capital R setup. So we're recursively deleting everything in the setup directory. And when we do ls now, setup is gone. We can refresh our page, and we appear to have everything in order. So this is the back end. Like I said, there are other videos out there that probably go into navigating through this and setting things up here, but at this point, kind of the tech side of things is taken care of. The other link was to the ticketing system. So here we can open new tickets, we can check ticket status. You can set up forms in the back end to change this and kind of set it up in a way that suits your purposes. So I hope this video was useful for you. If it was, please like, make comments in the comment box below, and I thank you for watching.